Hi guys, so this week we're in our woodland site. We're going to talk to you guys about how to put up some shelters. Shelters that we'll be covering in this video are A-frames and a lean-to. It'll be mainly Rob doing this video because he's overall quite good at this kind of stuff like shelters, bushcraft and survival. So hopefully we're going to make it into a series, do lots of different videos doing different things at our woodland site. It can relate to milsim, airsoft, but also for you guys who do backpacking, exploring just in general, off-roading or whatever. So this can be used for camping, minimalist camping. Some of you guys might be hunters as well. So yeah, let's get into it.
So first of all, we're going to talk about some kit we need for these shelters. Obviously the most important piece is your tarp. This is a 3 metre by 3 metre D&D tarp. I've had this for a number of years. It's in the DPM print. Now I find it blends in perfectly fine. Some people say it's too dark, but you know, through the night when this is actually up, if anything it adds a bit of contrast and fits in the woodland environment perfectly. Around the side you've got plenty of eyelets and little slings to tie into. So this means you can make loads of different shelters like the A-frame we're going to do today, the lean-to, but also mid-air suspended systems for rain protection, meetings and just general camp spots really. I know Will's got a smaller tarp.
Yeah, mine's just a simple pack away. I put it right at the bottom of my pack or Bergen or whatever. It's a little bit smaller, I think it's literally a 2x2, but it does the job if it's just really quick. I need to put a shelter up for a couple of hours at night. Again, it's waterproof, it's really, you can pack it away really quickly. Yeah, it's pretty nifty. It also doubles up as a poncho, so I know a lot of you guys run ponchos and use them for shelters. That's basically what it is. Packs away pretty tight and concealable as well. And that's just in the MTP, so technically not multicam, but MTP kind of pattern. Again, it works pretty well. It is a little bit lighter, so in the woodland it sticks out just a little bit more. It's a little bit more shiny.
A bit smaller as well
than the DPM, yeah. You are going to be exposed a little bit more to this, but that's why we're going to go over this as a lean-to rather than A-frame, just because it's not big enough to make an A-frame.
So next we're going to talk about a few accessories. Now this is, I think, 13mm paracord. It's 9 strands, so it's pretty strong. Obviously it's not climbing grade or anything like that. I use it purely for shelters, tying up bits of gear, all that sort of thing. It's cheap, it's disposable, I can cut it and not have to worry about buying a whole new roll of it. All you do have to do is burn the ends on the end of the cord to stop it fraying, but as with any paracord, you know, you expect that to happen. So this will act as your ridge line to drape the tarp over. Now it needs to be thick enough to hold itself and the weight of the tarp when it's under tension, but not too thick that it begins to be a pain in your bag, because obviously this packs down quite wide, as you can see, and it's also thick enough that it doesn't cause problems on your tarp. Anything too thin could actually wear through the waterproof layer on your tarp, which you do not want. Finally, all you need for these shelters are a few basic tent pegs. Now in the woods you can use sticks, but you know, if you're in a field environment, anything like that, it's best to just have a couple with you. You might not have time to make some or be in that sort of environment. And these double for all sorts of things. You know, you can use these as hooks, wrap some paracord around and suspend stuff, all that sort of thing. So they're very versatile, worth having with you. So the first stage in setting up an A-frame shelter is obviously the ridge line. So to do this, we're going to use this tree here and that tree back there. It needs to be wide enough to suspend your whole tarp and also be thick enough to support the weight of the tarp when it's pegged down. So to do this, I like to use a run and bowline, throw the rope around the tree like this, and then tie a simple bight in the rope, just like that, and then cross over the rope, through the loop, and then from here it's just a normal bowline. We will show you how to do this up close in another video, because it's, you know, you should know it, it's a really important knot. And what this allows you to do is slide the paracord down under tension. So as you can see there, you can dress it up really tight to the tree, and that will allow us to get a nice taut ridge line. And then moving on, we need to identify our other tree that we're going to tie to. Got a bit of a knot in this actually, but not to worry. And then once we've tied it off, it's really important to keep this rope tensioned, because if it sags at all, if it rains in the night or it's wind, you know, you're going to have problems with your tarp blowing all over the place and maybe even the rain catching on the tarp, which you don't want. So I loop it around the tree, pulling that taut side through as tight as I can get it. And then sometimes I wrap it round the tree like that and then tie it off. Now to tie it off you can use any sort of self-tensioning knot. I sometimes use a prusik, cow hitch or anything like that. But we'll show you guys how to do this up close. And then once you're tied off, you'll find that the ridge line will be nice and taut. Next, you've obviously got your tarp. Now this is where having a bigger tarp is advantageous, simply because you'll find you get more room on the sides of the shelter. So when it comes over, you just want to spread it along the ridge line. And if you've got a centre sling point here, you can in fact raise it up from a higher point anywhere in the canopy. It's not essential, it just gives you a little bit more room. But this is purely for a one night shelter. So Will here's got the tent pegs. What I like to do is start by doing the four corners of the tarp. This allows you to tension it without sort of pulling it out of line. So you can either go through the sling or through the eyelet itself. I find going through the sling is easier, but it's completely up to you. Now it doesn't have to be mental tight at this point, just peg down enough so you've got the spread of the tarp. There you go, Will. Pull that through. Now you want your tent peg sort of at a 45-degree angle. This gives it the best stability, and if in the case of wind, they're less likely to be pulled out. Thank you. Next we come to the other side. Do the same again. Now we can pull it a bit tighter, simply because we've got the other end pegged in. Again, about a 45-degree angle is perfect. Nice one. Now the reason why I like using 3 tent pegs on either side is just because that then pulls the centre of the tarp out as well. Unfortunately there isn't a centre sling point on this tarp, so you have to go either through the one on the left or the right. Now just because how I sleep, I prefer to have it in the far left one. It just gives you a little bit more room, put your kit in, keep that dry, because obviously if it rains in the night, you know, you need to keep your Mission Essential kit dry and out of the weather. And you can see here, just by doing that, it's a lot wider at the front here and narrower at the end. And you can see by the environment that we're in, you know, the wind is predominantly coming from behind Will over there and also straight up here. So the wind will hit the tarp and roll over. Rather than having it orientated this way, of say a tree behind there and then this one, the wind is funneled straight into the tarp, and that's going to make you incredibly cold throughout the night. And if it rains, you know, and the wind's blowing that way, you're going to get wet. So yeah, that is how I set up a simple A-frame tarp, and we'll move over to the lean-to. So the final thing we're going to talk about for this shelter is a ground sheet. Now before you put your sleeping system in, ideally you'd use a ground sheet. This one here fits this tarp perfectly. Now you want to, it is a bit big to be honest, but this can keep all my kit and me perfectly dry on it. The whole point of a ground sheet is basically to reduce the thermal loss at night when the damp comes out of the ground and basically sucks your heat away. Ideally you put this below your sleeping bag and then your roll mat on top. Now this, you know, it will keep you a hell of a lot warmer at night than without having it, as that ground just sucks your heat away from you. Will's got a much more minimalist setup, and this will fit in your pack a hell of a lot better than that big tarp.
Yeah, so I've actually got one of the Matador ground sheets. They're used for all kinds of things. You could actually use it, I suppose, as some kind of shelter. Thing is though, they're not waterproof at all, but they create that barrier between you and the ground so you don't lose too much heat overnight. and as you can see, it packs away really nicely. I can put it into a pocket, and even just at the bottom of my Bergen, it packs away really nicely, weighs nothing, takes up no room. As I unpack it, in each corner it actually has some built-in pegs to put it into the ground. It's another thing that I really like. I think that alloys and they're really lightweight, and they tuck away into the corners as well. So if you don't want to just completely peg it into the ground, it does weigh it down at the corners, which is a really nice feature.
So the final stages of putting up a shelter, especially in a sort of hostile environment, is concealment. We've now added a layer of ferns, bracken and a few sticks in front of the tarp. What this does is just breaks up the shape of it even more. Obviously, because of the ridge line is so taut, the tarp is quite a flat surface, and by adding this extra layer of concealment, it just aids protection basically, both from the wind and identification. So as you can see behind me, the tarp now is a lot more broken up with this extra foliage on. You know, it's harder to see, it's harder for people to spot you. It won't reduce thermal signature or anything like that, but for the visual detection that you're worried about, you know, it reduces it massively. So now we've gone through how to set up and use an A-frame shelter. Will is now going to talk you through setting up and operating out of a lean-to.
Yeah, so we're going to use my small tarp because lean-to requires really less material to cover. The wind is coming at us from down there and pushing up here, so what we want is to block that wind, so we're not going to get cold, the wind's not going to be blowing on us in the night. So the way that we're going to start it is by, quite frankly, leaning it to that way. So as described earlier, this is a poncho, so it does actually give me the option, if I wanted to tie something in the middle to suspend it even more, if I wanted just that little extra bit of room. Way that we're going to tie it to these trees is by just some standard bungees. You can find those anywhere. Obviously green is preferable because you don't want to stand out too much, as we are trying to stay relatively hidden. So what I'll do is I'll just hook it through one of the eyelets, and I'd say you want to tie it at about knee height, I would say. I'm just going to stretch it down to there. Through the other eyelet. Remember, measure it at knee height. So as you can see, that is actually really taut. You will want it just like that, because the worst thing that you want is for it to start sagging in the middle of the night and you wake up with tarp all over your face and you can't breathe. What I've got is just some pegs here now, and again at each corner on this side make it really taut, putting it at that 45-degree angle. Make sure that they're firmly in the ground. And because the ground is actually quite soft here, I am going to put a third in around the back. Just gives it a little bit more stability. And I might even pull this one back a little bit further. Again, 45-degree angle. So there we go, we have our lean-to shelter. And what we can do is simply put my ground sheet under here. And then I'm protected from the elements, so the wind will just go over it rather than cutting underneath it, because it's really taut, nothing's going to get under there, no wind's going to be cutting through. We know the wind is down that way, so there's no way that the wind is going to push in and then move it around or snap the bungees. And yeah, that is a really basic lean-to shelter. And again, it suits everybody, but it is just a little bit more minimal than the A-frame, a little bit less protection. So if you're worried about insects biting you and stuff, it's going to happen in that kind of shelter. But if you want something minimalist, you clearly are doing it in a rush, or you just want to stay hidden. So you're not going to really be worrying about that. That is a lean-to shelter. So now we've got our lean-to shelter set up and ready to sleep in. As mentioned before, this is a poncho, so what we have here is basically the hood. Just above it, we have this little bit of rope. And up here, I have set my belt up across this tree, and I've got my D-ring facing towards me. I've already pre-cut some paracord, and what we're going to do is get both ends together, put the loop through the D-ring, and both ends through the loop, just like that. Really simple. And then we've got a little knot on this rope already. I'm going to put both ends through again. Create a little loop. Through the loop again. Making sure that it is really nice and taut. And tie it on like that. And what that allows now is more headroom, space to put, if you have a relatively large pack, space to put your pack, keep all your equipment dry, yeah, just a little bit more room, so it doesn't really, it's not a fault or anything to the shelter itself. As you can see, Rob's now put a perfectly sized pack in there, and at average size, there's even a helmet on there as well. So that just allows a little bit more room. The wind can still flow over. The rain, if there is any, it will just drip down to this side. And that is how you would utilise an assaulter's belt or a battle belt, or whatever you have, with a simple D-ring and just a little knot through there with some 550 cord.